Hello and welcome friends to this session on communication mix unit 2. Up till now we have discussed the marketing communication process, and then we talked about the elements of effective communication, and we talked about the various communication platforms available to us, and we were in the middle of the process which is used for developing an effective communication campaign. If you recall our last few sessions, you would remember that these steps, out of these 8 steps, we have already discussed the first 5 steps. We know how to identify the target audience. We know what all communication objectives can be there. We know how to design the communication campaign message. We talked about the various communication channels available to a marketer and how he can choose a particular channel or how he can use a mix of these channels. And then we talked about the 4 major methods which are used to determine the communication budget, right? So this was in fact the discussion in our last session that we had, right? Now today we are going to move over to the final 3 steps, and we'll be covering these 3 steps today. So I would now be moving over to the 6th step, which is basically deciding the communication mix, right? So I hope you remember what marketing mix is. Marketing mix is product, price, place, promotion. Within that, where does communication come? Communication is same as promotion basically. So communication mix or promotion mix, we are basically talking about the major communication platforms available to us. And if you remember our earlier discussion, right in the beginning of this particular unit, you would remember that I had talked about the various communication platforms that are available to us. Do you remember this particular slide in this particular discussion wherein we talked about the various communication platforms, and I promised that we'll be taking them up in detail again later on. So please understand that as far as the communication platforms available to us are concerned, or as far as the communication mix is concerned, these 5 are the elements in the communication mix: advertising, sales promotion, personal selling, direct marketing, and public relations. Out of these 5 elements, in this particular subject that we are studying, advertising and sales management, basically it is going to talk in detail about the advertising as well as the personal selling. So we are going to talk about these two elements in the promotion mix, advertising and personal selling, in detail in the current course. As far as the first 3 units are concerned, they are dealing with advertising. In fact, the 3rd unit specifically deals with advertising, while the 2nd unit, basically, which we are currently discussing, deals with the communication as a whole rather than a particular element of communication or a particular element of communication mix. While the 4th and the 5th unit, we will have a detailed discussion on personal selling, right? So as far as the communication platforms available to you are concerned, these 5 are the elements which are there. So these 5 comprise the communication mix or the promotional mix, and what we are going to do today is, in this particular step number 6, we are going to talk about how the decision regarding which particular element to be used or what mix of elements to be used is taken, right? So this is going to be the agenda as far as the discussion today is concerned. So let us start our discussion, right? So now, how do we decide the communication budget? The communication mix? You know, the various elements are advertising, personal selling, sales promotion, direct marketing, and public relations. So how do we decide which particular element to be used? And how do we decide? Maybe at times we might decide to use a combination of these elements. So how do we make these decisions? That is what is going to be the discussion today. So it depends. This decision depends on a number of things. So we'll be talking about all these aspects, and then we'll be talking about which aspect will lead to what kind of decision regarding the communication mix regarding the elements in the communication mix. So the first aspect which is very important whenever you are making this decision is, what is the buyer readiness stage? I hope you have read about this in marketing. Some buyers, what do we mean by buyer readiness? First of all, some buyers are aware that your product is there in the market. Some are able to understand what your product is offering, what all features it offers, what all attribute it has, and what all benefit it provides you. Then the third stage is when the buyer is convinced that your product is better than the other product in the market, right? And then once he is convinced, then he starts ordering the product, and many a times after ordering the product, he's satisfied, he uses it and he's satisfied, and then he places a repeat order. So these are the various buyer readiness stages. I hope you understand now what we mean by buyer readiness. Either the buyer is unaware, so he is still not reached stage 1. He is simply unaware that your product exists in the market. So he is unaware and he is still not reached stage 1. It could be that he is aware but he does not understand what your product is all about, what all features does it have. So here the buyer is in stage 1. He does not comprehend, he does not understand what your product is all about, what all attribute does it have. It may so happen that the buyer is aware about your product, and he is also aware of what all features it has, what all benefits it has, and what all attributes it has. But he is not convinced that your product is the best product available in the market, is best product available in the market, or is better than the rival products in the market. So he has reached stage 2 but is still to move on to stage 3. It may so happen that the buyer is ready to buy your product. He is convinced that your product is the best in the market, but because of various reasons he is delaying his purchase. Is that fine? So then the buyer is at stage 3 because he has not yet placed an order. If he places an order, he is at stage 4, and if he starts reordering it, if he repeats his purchase of his if he starts repeating his purchase, if he starts buying again and again, then he has reached our stage number 5. Is that okay? So this is what we mean by buyer readiness stages, and for different stages we have got different elements that will be more effective. Now if the buyer is not aware, then you go for advertising and publicity, right? So you go for the advertising and publicity. This combination would serve you the best to increase the awareness levels. However, if the buyer is aware that your product is there in the market, this particular brand is there in the market, you have to make him understand what all features does the product have, and you generally would require more time for this, and that is why in this stage advertising and personal selling is used. Personal selling, why personal selling here? Because personal selling would mean that you would have more time to educate the prospective buyer regarding the attributes, regarding the features of your product. That is why personal selling is also used at this particular stage. However, advertising can also be used. Many a times advertisements also can educate the customers, right? Now if he is at stage 3, then you go for personal selling. Now personal selling is used at stage 3. Why is this the case? Because please understand, you may not, as a buyer or as a customer, you may not be able to trust whatever is being said in an advertisement. But if a salesperson of a particular company comes to you and then talks to you about his product, there are chances that you have a greater level of trust. You would be able to believe him more than the claims made in the advertisements, and that is why personal selling is used prominently here. Again, why in stage 4, apart from personal selling, we are using sales promotion? Please understand that there is a reason behind this. Sales promotion we are using to incentivize the prospective buyer into rushing his purchase, into making his purchase sooner than what he has planned. Please understand, supposing a buyer is at stage 3, he is aware of the product, he has understood the benefits, and he is convinced that this is the best product, but he is not purchasing. What would you do? Then you would give him a discount offer, or would you give him a free gift if he purchases within the next 1 month, let's say. So in that particular sense, you are enticing the buyer into preponing his purchase, into purchasing the product as soon as possible. So here we are going to see that sales promotion is going to play a major role. Sales promotion would include things like free gifts, discount offers, free trials in case you want to join a particular college, mock classes, so your demonstration classes, right? Or for example, if you want to buy a car, then you get a demo ride, right? So all these are examples of sales promotion. Or for example, if you want to buy a particular, let's say you want to buy a particular product, you would be provided a free gift along with that purchase. So these are examples of sales promotion. And to make the prospective buyer who is convinced that your product is the best and who plans to buy a product in somewhere in future, to make him prepone his purchase, you go for sales promotion. Now as far as reordering is concerned, again you would be using personal selling, again sales promotion, and reminder advertising. Reminder advertising is reminding him that he has to purchase the product again. So that is what reminder advertising is all about. We'll be discussing it in unit 3. Then as far as personal selling is concerned, the salesperson would go and ask for another order. And as far as sales promotion is concerned, you might come up with loyalty programs which reward the buyer who purchases again and again. So these kind of loyalty programs are being run by various companies. So for example, if you are using the same bank, they would probably also be rewarding you for repeat usage, right? So these kind of loyalty programs are part of sales promotion. So herein you would be making use of sales promotion. I would not be probably talking in detail about advertising and personal publicity and personal selling and direct marketing here. The reason is that you have already read about all these elements in detail in marketing management in your BBA third semester. So I will not be taking them up in detail. I'll only be talking about which particular element suits which kind of conditions. So which particular element is going to be the most effective in which kind of conditions, in which kind of situations, right? So as far as the buyer readiness stage, we have understood what all different elements are going to be used at different stages. Now let's talk about the type of product market. Now what do we mean by this? There are consumer markets and then there are business markets. What is the difference between them? Consumer market is when you are selling to the end customer, and the person who is buying your product is making use of that product for his own consumption. He's buying your product for his own consumption. He's not buying this product for somebody else. So that is what we mean by consumer markets, right? So what are the various examples? When you are selling a toothpaste, let's say, the retailer is selling it to the end customer. This is fine. The end customer is not using that paste for somebody else. He's not keeping that particular toothpaste aside for use in his hotel, let's say. He's using it for himself. Then this is an example of a consumer market. On the other hand, if you have sold the same toothpaste, a big carton of toothpaste, to a person who owns a hotel, and why have you sold him that particular carton of toothpaste? So that he can use it in his hotel. Then this is an example of a business market, right? So many companies operate in consumer market. For example, if you talk about Nestle, PepsiCo, they generally operate in consumer markets. Most of their sales come from consumer markets. On the other hand, companies like Intel, I hope you remember our example that I took up in my earlier sessions. Intel is selling chips which are used to manufacture mobile phones or which are used to manufacture laptops, right? Or Windows, which provides software, operating system to various laptops. Now, these companies are into business market because they are not selling as such to the end customer. They are selling it to an intermediary who is going to make use of their product to further come up with a product to sell to the end customer. So maybe Windows would sell its operating system to HP or Dell, right? And HP and Dell would be making use of this operating system to make their laptops, to assemble the laptops and then sell it to the end customer. So while HP is operating in the consumer market, in this particular example, the Microsoft or the Intel is operating in the business market. Is that understood? Right? Now please remember that consumer markets, many a time we use the terminology business to customers, B2C, while business markets are B2B. So you understand the difference between the two. But please also understand that there are marketers, there are companies which sell both in the consumer market as well as the business markets. Is that fine? For example, even Coca-Cola, for which the sales prominently come from the consumer market, they also sell to various hotels, restaurants, various companies which are running their own canteens. So in that sense, they are also operating in the business markets, but predominantly their sales come from the consumer markets. Is that fine? So depending on which particular kind of product market you are operating in, you will decide your communication mix, or you will decide the proportion of different elements in your communication mix. If you are operating in the consumer market, sales, promotion and advertising are going to be your major elements that you are going to use. You would also be using personal selling and public relations, but the amount of expenditure would be much less. On the other hand, if you are operating in the business markets, B2B selling generally takes place through personal selling. So B2B, whenever the product has to be sold, personal selling is one thing that is made use of. You generally do not see Microsoft Windows coming up with their ad. Do you see a Microsoft Windows ad which is basically operating in a B2B market? Do you see an Intel ad? Intel ad you probably see once in a while. If you talk about, let's say, a bike, do you see the ad of a company which manufactures gear assembly, or which manufactures brake assembly? You don't see these ads because they are simply not targeting you as their audience. They are targeting those companies which assemble bikes, and for that purpose these companies are making use of personal selling. So in business markets, B2B, personal selling is used, and then sales promotion is also made use of. Advertising is used but in a very limited fashion, and again public relations is used but in a very limited fashion. Is this understood? So depending on the type of product market that you are operating, for example, if you talk about Department of Business Administration here in Pithoragarh, we are dealing in consumer market, so it makes sense to go for sales promotion or to go for advertising, right? On the other hand, let's say Jai Bharat Maruti is a firm which actually provides some parts to Maruti Suzuki and to various other automobile manufacturers. So it does not need to make use of advertising, it would only be making use of personal selling. So depending on which particular product market you are operating in, you can decide which particular element to use more prominently in your overall communication mix. Now, which particular communication mix you are going to use and which particular element in the communication mix you are going to use will also depend on whether the product is a high involvement product or a low involvement product. And while I say this, I hope that you remember our earlier discussion on high involvement and low involvement products. High involvement products are those which entail a lot of risk for the customer, because probably the customer at times has to spend a lot of money, or there is a lot of prestige at stake for the customer. So these are called high involvement products, and these products are generally very complicated or maybe costly or risky in this sense. For example, the kind of gel that you might use may drive away your friends. In that sense, which particular brand of gel you use or which particular brand of deodorant you use, it's going to be a very risky decision for you, because if you don't use the right brand of hair gel or right brand of deodorant, it may drive away your friends. So though the gel would not cost you more than 300 rupees or 200 rupees, though the Deodorant is not going to cost you more than 200 rupees, but even then it is a risky purchase, and these kind of purchases are known as high involvement purchases, high involvement purchase situations, right? So here we make use of personal selling. Why do we use personal selling here? The reason is, in personal selling what happens, please understand, you send your salesperson across to the prospective buyer, to the prospect. I hope you remember our discussion on prospects. So you are sending the salesperson to the prospect, and then the salesperson is talking about his product, is talking about the various features, various attributes of his product, and is demonstrating his products to the prospective buyer. Naturally, in this kind of an interaction, the prospective buyer will have greater trust on what the salesperson is saying. If you compare it with the trust level on an advertisement seen in television or an advertisement read in a newspaper, you would find that the level of trust would be much more in personal selling situations, right? And that is why we are making use of personal selling in high involvement products, because they entail a lot of risk and the prospective buyer needs to trust you to purchase your product, and to make him trust you, you use personal selling, right? So these kind of this particular element of communication mix is used when you are into high involvement products. And that is why if you are selling insurance, if you are selling a generator, if you are selling a car, you many a times make use of personal selling, and you many a times sell through salespersons, right? Again, it will also depend, the communication mix that you're going to use will also depend on whether you are a market leader or whether you are a market follower or whether you are a market challenger. Now, who is the market leader? The firm with the largest market share is the market leader. If you talk about the automobile industry, if you talk specifically about the four-wheeler market here in India or passenger car markets here in India, you would find that Maruti Suzuki is the market leader. Who is the market challenger? The firm which occupies the second position in terms of market share in a particular market. For example, here in India, it's Hyundai. If you're talking about passenger vehicles, passenger cars, so the market leader is Maruti Suzuki, while market challenger is Hyundai. And the other firms which are operating in the market, let it be Tata, be it Honda, these companies would be called market followers, right? So when you are a leader in the market, you can afford to make use of advertising only. You don't need to worry about any other element. So predominantly you would be using advertising. On the other hand, if you are a small competitor, let's say if you are a market challenger, or let's say if you are a market follower, you are a small competitor and you have to compete against the market leader, then you'll have to go for sales promotion. What does it mean? This means, please understand, for example, if Achal is the market leader in Pithoragarh market, they can only go for advertising. And suppose Ananda wants to corner a big chunk of this market, Pithoragarh market, so they are challenging the market leader Anchal. What will Ananda do? They simply cannot match Anchal on the advertising front. So what will they do? They will go for sales promotion, which will include consumer promotion as well as trade promotion. Now what will happen? Consumer promotion would be that they might offer a free gift to every customer who buys a 1 liter pack of their milk. So this is what they can do. So this would be known as consumer promotion. On the other hand, they can also offer their distributors and dealers higher margin. So for every packet that you are selling, if Anchal is giving the retailer just 50 paisa, they will offer him 2 rupees. Now this will do what? This will lead to the shopkeepers, to the retailers. This will make them push your product to the customers. So they will do what? They will push your product to the customer. So they will tell the customer, no, this Ananda milk is better than the Anchal milk. Please buy Ananda milk. So this is how you'll be able to increase your sales. So these are various tactics that you will be using in the market. The former is known as the consumer promotion, wherein you are incentivizing the end customer. The letter wherein we talked about incentivizing the intermediaries, incentivizing the dealers or distributors, giving them higher margin, or incentivizing the retailer. This is known as trade promotion. And sales promotion includes both consumer promotion as well as trade promotion. So you would be making use of this element of the communication mix. So rather than trying to match your rival in terms of advertising expenditure, you would go for this particular mix in this particular element in the communication mix. Now, stage in PLC. Now I hope you remember what PLC is all about. Product life cycle. Do you recall this? Product life cycle. The product has been introduced here, and this is the y-axis is showing the sales, and then the x-axis is showing time. The product has been introduced here. The sales slowly pick up. They start increasing in the growth stage, and then they start plateauing. They start flattening out at the maturity, and then there is a decrease in sales. This is known as the decline stage. So I'm not going to discuss in detail all these stages. You've already read about them in unit in marketing management in BBA third semester. I'll be talking about the various decisions regarding the communication mix. As far as the introduction stage is concerned, you would go for advertising and publicity. And advertising and publicity would be used much more than sales promotion. However, sales promotion would also be used, because sales promotion, you would be inducing trials. So for example, you might offer free trial, like I said, free demo class in case of an education institution or a coaching institution, or a free pack of soap. So for example, if you're a new brand selling soaps, what will you do? You'll offer a free small soap pack to your prospective customers so that they can try out your product without spending anything, and if they are convinced with the quality of your product, they would come to buy your product. So here sales promotion would be used just to induce trials. However, advertising and publicity is going to play a major role, specifically advertising. Why? Because advertising would create a lot of awareness among the customers that your product exists and that it is a good product in the market, better than the other rivals in the market. So you would be going for advertising and publicity. Now what do we mean by publicity? Publicity is non-paid form of communication. Publicity is when people start knowing about it, when your target audience knows about you without you having to spend anything. For example, I'll give an example. Supposing one of our student goes on to clear CAT. So one of our student in BBA 5th semester appears in CAT and he qualifies with a good percentile, and then people will get to know about him, and then people will also get to know about the department or about the course that he was pursuing, and then people will get to know about BBA from Degree College Pithoragarh. Now this is publicity. We didn't have to spend any money. We simply don't spend any money, but still our target audience gets to know about us. For example, whenever a movie is about to get released, what happens? Have you noticed that so many gossips regarding the affair between the lead actor and the lead actress start surfacing in the newspapers? Now this is an example of publicity. Free of cost, people get to know about you, and basically you are getting free publicity for your movie. And this is generally a tactics which is used by various movie production houses. So this is what publicity is, and you would look for advertising and publicity in the introductory stage. However, you may use personal selling when you want to gain distribution coverage. What do we mean by this? Please understand. Suppose I launch a new brand of agarbattis in the market. So we've got one of our student. Let's say Kamal has decided to launch his Dhwaj brand of agarbattis in the market. But the market is already cluttered. There are so many brands of agarbattis in the market, and Kamal does not have a lot of money to advertise his product on national television, for example. Then what will Kamal do? Kamal will go to the various distributors and try to convince them that his brand of agarbatti, his Dhwaj brand of agarbatti is better than the other products in the market. And then he would try to get these dealers to stock his agarbattis, because when these dealers start stocking his agarbattis, they would push these agarbattis to the retailers, and then the retailer again would start stocking these agarbattis, and the retailer would then push it to the customer. This way Kamal would be able to generate a market, to generate sales for his Dhwaj brand of agarbattis. Now this would mean gaining distribution coverage. So you have been able to increase your distribution coverage just by going for personal selling. So to make the various distributors, dealers stock your product, order your product, and then further push it to the end customer, you start selling, you start using personal selling, you start convincing them by making use of personal selling. So you send your salesperson who will convince these distributors, dealers and retailers about the quality of your product, and then they would be convinced, and then they would stock your product, and then they would push your product to the end customer, and that is the target, that is the whole objective, and that is why you are making use of personal selling in the introductory stage also. So what do we mean by this? Though advertising and publicity are going to be used predominantly, sales promotion is also going to be used at times to induce trials, and personal selling can also be used to increase distribution coverage. Fine. Now let's move over to growth stage. Now what happens in the growth stage? Advertising will continue. Please understand, if you talk about the expenditure on advertising, it will increase in the growth stage. When your sales is picking up, when your sales are picking up, you would increase your expenditure on advertising. So in absolute terms, your expenditure in advertising would increase. In fact, it would be more in the growth stage. But if you talk about advertising expenditure per unit sold, that would be less in the growth stage, and that would be much more in the introductory stage. Please understand what I have said in the last 1 minute. You can go back to the instance where I started off. So please understand, in the growth stage, your absolute expenditure in advertising would be more than in the introductory stage. But if you talk about advertising expenditure per unit sold, so for every unit that you are selling, what is the average advertising expenditure? That would be less in the growth stage and more in the introductory stage. The reason is, in the introductory stage also you are spending a lot of money. In the growth stage you are spending even more, but in the growth stage you are also selling a very large number of units. So for average expenditure on advertising per unit sold, this would be much less in the growth stage. Absolute terms, the advertising expenditure would be more, but in terms of advertising expenditure per unit sold, the expenditure would be much less than the introductory stage. Fine. Second thing is word of mouth advertising, and I hope you remember our earlier discussion on word of mouth. If the customer is satisfied with your product, if the one-time buyer, the buyer who purchased your product for the first time buyer is satisfied with your product, then what will he do? He'll himself purchase, but he'll also spread a good word of mouth about your product, and he'll cause others also to purchase he'll make others also to purchase your product, he'll convince others also to purchase your product, and that is what we mean by word of mouth advertising. Have you ever noticed these small budget movies which get released in few screens, in few theaters only, and they are only able to earn us very small revenue in the first 3-4 days, but then slowly the audience increases and their revenue earnings also increase? What is happening actually is word of mouth advertising, word of mouth publicity. So a word of mouth, those who saw that particular movie on Friday when it got released, those few people, they were really happy with the outcome, and then they convinced the others, they convinced their fellow colleagues, they convinced their friends, they convinced their relatives to watch that movie, and this is how generally sales increase, this is how generally revenue earnings increase. So this is what we know as word of mouth, right? And if you remember our earlier discussion, just like we have a positive word of mouth, we may have a negative word of mouth, and we should try everything in our power to ensure that that negative word of mouth does not spread. Fine. So what we have to do here is, you have to rely more on word of mouth advertising, word of mouth And how do we have word of mouth? We have to ensure that the customers who are the first time buyers, they are satisfied with our product. We have discussed how to make good use of word of mouth. This we have already discussed in our earlier sessions. You can refer to those lectures, right? Now, as far as the maturity stage is concerned, now here what has happened is, please understand, the sales have started flattening. There is no more increase in the sales. You can have a look at the graph here. So the sales have started flattening. In fact, see, they started slowly, they started flattening up, right? So this was the maturity stage. Now what do we do here? We can go for sales promotion. Now here sales promotion is going to be used most prominently. What do we mean by sales promotion here? Here what we will do is, we will offer our existing customers some loyalty rewards, some free gifts, some loyalty offers, so that they continue our purchase, so that they continue purchase from our stable, they continue their purchase, they keep purchasing our products. So this is what we are going to do, and that is why here sales promotion is going to play the major role. Advertising you will continue, but you will have to spend more on sales promotion. So it may so happen that you may start rewarding some, you may start giving away some gifts to your loyal customers who have been purchasing a product, and you start some loyalty programs that if you keep purchasing our product, we will provide you this and this gift, such and such kind of offer. So please understand that in maturity stage, just to ensure that your current customers keep purchasing your product, you start going for sales promotion, right? And to make the new customers buy your product, what will you do? You will again use sales promotion. So for example, the products may come up with an offer of free gift, so the customer would purchase your product not just because of the quality in your product, but they would also purchase because they are enticed by the free gift that is being offered by you, right? So that is what you are going to do here. Sales promotion is going to be more prominently used than advertising and personal selling here. What will happen in the decline stage? Now please understand, decline stage, your sales have started declining. You reduce your expenditure in advertising, you reduce your expenditure in other elements. However, you are still left with some stock. The sales have declined, but the production has already happened, so you are left with a lot of stock, and you want to clear that stock. And how do you do that? You will again make use of sales promotion to clear your stocks. So whatever is left with the retailers, if you want it to get sold, what will you do? You'll come up with sales promotion, right? So you might reduce the price, you might come up with buy one get one offer, so that you can get rid of the stock that you have. Fine. On the other hand, you will reduce your expenditure in advertising and direct marketing, because in any case your sales are declining. Fine. So this is how you're going to make use of different elements in the overall communication mix, depending on the stage in the product life cycle, right? Now one more thing that you have to keep into account, you have to bear in your mind, is that whenever you are coming up with a communication mix, whenever you are making a decision, you have to ensure that there is a consistency in messaging and your promotional message. Whatever you are using, whichever element you are using, you might be using one element only, you might be using a number of elements. For example, you might be using direct marketing, you might also be using, at the same time you might be using personal selling, you might be using advertising. So whatever element you are using, there should be a consistency in messaging. So for example, if you want to promote your brand as a brand which celebrates love, for example Cadbury's Daily Milk, which celebrates this feeling of togetherness, then whatever element you are using, be it the print advertisement, be it the television advertisement, be it the direct marketing campaigns, be it the personal selling efforts, whatever you are doing, they should consistently show the same message. They should consistently project the same kind of image for the brand. There should not be a conflict in the image projected by two different elements that you are using in the communication mix. So whatever elements you are using, they should have a consistency. the message should be consistent, and this is known as integrated marketing communication. All the communication mix elements have to be integrated into one whole. They have to project same consistent image, right? So this is what you have to bear in your mind. Now that we have completed this step 6, now we are moving over to the step 7 and step 8 in the process. The step 7, as you would recall, is measuring results. So how do you do that? You can do that based on expenses and outputs. So how much you are spending and how much you are able to increase your visibility. That is what we mean by output. So number of advertisements that you have placed, this is what we mean by output. So how much you have spent, this is one, and how much have you been able to increase your visibility. So number of advertisements that have been placed in various newspapers, for example. Clipping counts, what do we mean by clipping counts? Press clippings, number of times your brand name appeared in various news articles in press. What do we mean by press? We are talking about print media. And media costs. So you are basically here expenses, how much you have spent on various media platforms, right? So you can take a measure of these aspects also. However, please understand, then there is a deficiency in this kind of measurement. The deficiency is that we are not taking into account the outcomes. We are not taking into account what actually happened because of this. So we can also have outcome based measurements, wherein we are talking about reach and frequency, wherein we are talking about recognition scores. Reach and frequency means how many people have been exposed to your ad and how many times have they been exposed to your ads. We'll be discussing them in detail. Then recognition scores, whether there is an increase in recognition, whether people have started recognizing your brand more, right? Whether the target audience attitude has changed, the target audience attitude towards your product has changed, whether they are responding in terms of purchasing your product or in terms of advocating your products to their friends or family members or relatives or colleagues. So these outcomes also you are looking for. Is that making sense? So while you can measure the result using how much you are spending and what is the output, how much exposure you are getting in the media, what you can also do is you can go for an outcome based approach wherein you are actually measuring the actual impact of your communication campaign. So this is how you are going to measure your results, right? Our next discussion in the coming session would be about the communication mix, and therein we'll be talking about advertising. So we have completed this process of designing the communication campaign, designing the communication program, and in the next session that we'll have, we'll be talking about the communication mix.